Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that echoes through history as one of the most influential military leaders the world has ever seen. A man who rose from the chaos of revolution, reshaped Europe, and built legal systems still used today. But after the flames of glory faded, one moment changed everything: Waterloo. And the man who had ruled empires ended his life far from home, on the remote island of St. Helena. That is where Napoleon spent his final years and his final 24 hours. Before we dive into his last day, let's briefly remember who Napoleon was. He was a Corsican artillery officer who rose rapidly during the French Revolution. In 1799, he seized power, and in 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. He built an empire stretching from Spain to the borders of Russia. But ambitious campaigns, a disastrous invasion of Russia, and relentless coalitions eventually defeated him. His second exile, this time to St. Helena, would be his last. Napoleon's final 24 hours began on May 4, 1821. He had been suffering for weeks from severe stomach pain, vomiting, and weakness. His doctors suspected a stomach ulcer or cancer, the same illness that had killed his father. At around 5 p.m., he drifted into a half-conscious state. He murmured fragments of past battles. Tiet d'armée, the head of the army. His mind seemed to wander back to the battlefields that had shaped his life. One member of his entourage later wrote that Napoleon looked as if he were fighting an invisible enemy to the very end. In the early hours, Napoleon's condition worsened. Around 2 a.m., his breathing became shallow and irregular. Men who had once followed him across continents now stood helplessly by his bedside. The emperor who had commanded millions lay weak in a small, damp room on a lonely British-controlled island. At around 10 a.m., Napoleon briefly woke and spoke his final clear words: France, Army, Josephine. France, the Army, Josephine. Three things that had defined his life. The warm island air filled the room. Napoleon's breath slowed. His doctors and attendants watched silently as the man who had shaken Europe lay motionless. At 5:49 p.m., on May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte took his final breath. Longwood House fell quiet. The reign of Napoleon, both feared and admired, had come to an end. Napoleon's body was embalmed and buried on St. Helena. 19 years later, his remains were returned to France. Today, beneath the red dome of the Hôtel des Invalides in Paris, rests the man who transformed a continent. His legal reforms, the Napoleonic Code, still form the foundation of modern law in many countries. His strategies are studied in military academies across the world. And his life story, rising from nothing to emperor, continues to inspire millions. These were the final 24 hours of Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who left the world far from the noise of battle, but forever in the spotlight of history. Napoleon's legacy continues to shape the world, and there are many more stories to tell. Stay tuned.